It's lathe time, finally. For those of you who don't know, I set out long ago to build a gingery lathe and all the other projects, potentially. And that was a long time ago, and then I didn't do anything about it. But now's the time, finally, and we're going to push forward through this until it's done. Oh dear, what have I started? So anyway, brief introduction. This is the book I'm talking about. There are actually 7 books in this one book. You can buy them individually, or you can get this large hardcover thing that's, tough enough and big and heavy to deter home invaders and potentially act as a self-defense weapon. And the lathe is chapter 2. What's chapter 1? A charcoal foundry. I think I lingered a little too far on the foundry part. No longer use charcoal. But chapter 2 is pretty awesome. It's very useful. It starts with a brief history of lathes and other stuff, and then gets into the making it. Now, this video series is not going to be a buy the book thing. If you want to buy the book thing, I suggest a video series by Makercise. I'll link that down below. This will not be that. I don't tend to build things by the book. I tend to do more like a Tim Taylor meets Red Green kind of scenario, but with no manly grunts and fewer references to North American marsupials. So what I mean is, this is going to be modified a bit. And to explain that, let's look at the castings. Yes, I have some castings already. Ta-da! So I got these, actually, from Chirpy. Chirpy's Tinkerings is the channel. I'll link that down below. And Chirpy was building these. These are some of his very first castings. So he told me, no judging on the porosity and stuff. But Chirpy ended up getting this super old antique lathe, and then he restored it, and it's a freaking work of art. So he didn't want to mess with this anymore. So he gave these to me when he came to visit. And this is not all the castings. This is just a decent amount of them. Got some of the big honking ones ready to go. But Chirpy, he modified them. So like this is extra thicker than the normal ones. There's a little core shift, but even at the thinnest spot, it's as thick as the lathe is supposed to be. And this, I think he said this is beefed up a bit. And some of the castings that I don't have, there are 3D models online of modified ones that Chirpy has beefed up. So we'll get to that when I get to that. We'll start with this. So I'm going to try to finish these castings. They're all rough castings. Any that I can't finish, I'll redo on my own. Either in aluminum, or I was actually planning on using Zamic, a zinc alloy. That's denser than aluminum and vibration dampening like cast iron. Or I could just do cast iron, because I've recently discovered I can do cast iron in my furnace, which will be fun. Of course, having all these is going to save me a lot of time. Now, in the Gingery book, he started with like core plates and some ball cranks, and I made videos about those a long time ago. And don't watch them because I'm fat and they turned out bad, and I'm probably not going to use them. But the first casting in the lathe book is this one, the bed. This is where I think everything kind of like, it sits up on these feet, and like that's where it sits. The top of this needs to be perfectly flat, but as you can tell, I don't have a lathe or a shaper or something to flatten it. So that's where scraping comes in. Ta-da! I got these, also from Chirpy. These are 2 little carbide scrapers brazed onto the end of some steel rod. I got a big one and a small one, and they work in conjunction with something else I got. This is a granite surface plate. So a granite surface plate is something that, it's made out of granite, and one of the sides of it is ultra flat, like within 1/1000th of an inch of perfect. I think there are different grades of them, and the more accurate they are, you can get them up to like 1/1000th of an inch perfectly flat, and that's not this one. Because the more accurate they are, the more expensive they are. This was about as good as I could get for the $1. It's that big, 18 by 6 by 2. And I got it from Woodcraft, actually, which is a woodworking kind of store. And people use these for flattening the soles of planes. It's a lot cheaper than McMaster Carr. It's pretty accurate. It should be fine for me. Here's how it works. Got this Prussian blue. Put a little dab. Just a dab will do you, or so I've heard. It's cold out here. This dye it's not particularly viscous at 35 degrees. And you roll it out with this. Man, it is just too cold. It is just chilly out here. For those of you who don't know, this is Wisconsin, and it's January, so my garage is not as cold as the outside, but let's just say a polar bear would still be quite comfortable. Okay, that's clearly not enough ink. Okay, I like learning by doing. One thing I've learned, do not use a granite surface plate in a refrigerator. Prussian blue does not like that. Okay, but you want to rub it out really thin. You know, like this is pretty thin. I've got it spread out on the whole thing, and I can see the detail of the granite through the ink. And now, I'm going to take this and rub it. Notice something. The granite plate is not longer than this thing. Yes, I should have gotten one bigger, but this is the only piece that's bigger than like this much. And the larger the granite plate is, much like being more accurate, the price goes through the freaking roof, and I wasn't going to buy a $300 surface plate for this one part. You know, you'll have to forgive me. But you take the part, you rub it around, and you take a peek. Anything blue is a high point. Now you'll notice, high point here, high point here. But if I rub it here, high point here, high point here. Let me show you a diagram why this is a problem and why this means I probably should have gotten a full-size one. Okay, I don't have any paper, so we're going to have to use the refrigerator for this. Now, I have 4 high points on a long thing. So I don't have a straight long thing like this. I have lumps. Lump, 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 lump. You see how I drew it? These two are higher up than these two. That's why if I just have the surface plate between here and here, the high points are there and there. If I have the surface plate between here and here, the high points are here and here. That's how I know that the two ones are lower than the side ones. And if I slap it, I can actually slap it down right in the middle, like here to here, and then I get high points here and here. So I have 4 high points in different planes, and I want the whole thing perfectly flat. See the problem? If I were to have a full-size surface plate from here to here, I would only get high spots there and there. So I think, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, and if you see someone named Chirpy's Tinkerings telling me I'm wrong, listen to him. He's probably right. I think if I just measure here, and I get these two, I should flatten this. Until I start seeing this, this, and this. Then I know those points will be at the same spot. Then, if I measure this spot, I got to remove this side hump and only this side hump until I get this, this, and this to show up at once, instead of just these two. I really hope this is making sense. I could try to explain more, but I'd just be repeating myself, and if I haven't made sense by now, it's hopeless. So, you got the blue here. What does that mean? Well, I got this nice nifty diagram, also from Chirpy. This is 1 square inch. These arches have to do with shaping the carbide scrapers. Ignore that. Forget I said that. This is 1 square inch. You can plop it down and see how many spots there are within this 1 square inch. Now you're not going to get it solid blue, but you want many tiny points. That's because scraping, hand scraping, does not give you a mirror perfectly flat surface. It gives you a perfectly flat surface with a lot of scrape marks. And that's actually good. The scrape marks allow for like oil to go in there, and they stay in the grooves, and you can get a nice frictionless surface. But what you want to see is similar to this, and full disclosure, I've scraped a bunch of these already. On a live stream, for example, a long time ago, I did a bunch of this. But we don't want that there. We want tiny spots very evenly across the whole thing. To get rid of those, you take the scraper. This is a carbide thing. You know, you can hold, you can push down with this hand. There are a lot of videos on scraping on the internet. I'm sure they're more detailed than this is, probably because they're by people who actually know what they're doing. Basically, take, scrape, scrape, scrape. Scrape the blue spots. Don't scrape the non-blue spots. It's going to scrape in this direction. Now if we imagine I scrape all the blue off, I go re-blue it, and I get kind of a different pattern. Then I'm going to want to scrape in like a different direction, you know? So you don't want to go scraping the same direction every time. Switch it up. Eventually, as we knock down all the high points, we'll get to a point where there's the blue spots will start spreading out further and further and further, and we'll do like the whole plate right to left. and the whole plate in a different direction, the whole plate in a different direction, and eventually the whole plate will be perfectly flat. And if that seems really tedious to you, yes, good job, your powers of observation are great. It is really tedious. That's why milling machines and shapers were invented, because this is not so fun to do for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Although the surface finish is really cool. Probably should have mentioned very much earlier in this video, but the Gingery Lathe has you building it out of aluminum, because aluminum is easy to cast. Good lathes are made out of cast iron, and there's a reason for that. Cast iron is, well, tougher, it's heavier, it's stronger, it's also vibration dampening. Aluminum is none of those things. So, just keep that in mind. Gingery Lathe is not a top quality amazing lathe. It is kind of a barely functioning one that you can build, but while building it, you learn how to do new things like hand scraping, and in the end you end up with a lathe that you can use, that you know how to use. So it's a very educational kind of system. Flip! Now supposedly with scraping, you can change your pressure, and changing the pressure kind of changes the depth of cut. So that way you can really like lean in, which I'm not doing, and really kind of hog off a whole bunch of material at a time and get through it much quicker. There, that's better. That's all the blue. But you can see the scratches go in different directions and you get kind of a cool surface. Just imagine what it's going to look like when it's done. Well, you don't have to imagine. I'm going to show you when it's done. Back to the blue. Now this is the side I just stopped on. See? It looks different now. In another direction. What will happen next? I don't know. This is not particularly dramatic work. Doesn't look terribly different, does it? Reminded of that Greek myth about Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill, and then when he gets to the top it just falls back down the hill again. I think if that were written today and machinists were in charge of the world, he would be hand scraping something that was eternally out of flat. Join me next time, if my arms don't fall off, when this will be done, because I'm cutting ahead to that part. See you later.